I never imagined that my own son's words could hurt me so deeply. I stood there in the dark hallway of our home, my heart racing and my hands trembling, holding the empty tray I had used to serve tea that evening. It would be so nice if that old lazy woman just disappeared. The voice was his, my Marcelo, the same boy I carried for 9 months, whom I nursed, and for whom I lost countless nights of sleep. Now, at 41, he whispered those words to his wife, thinking I couldn't hear. I am Clotilde Fernandez, I'm 68 years old, and I'm here to tell a story that completely changed my life and my family's. A story about ingratitude, necessary pain. Many of you watching this video may have felt that sense of invisibility, of not being valued, especially after a certain age. That night, I stood frozen in the hallway of our apartment in Grajeau, here in Rio de Janeiro. Time seemed to freeze as Marcelo's words echoed in my head. Old, lazy, me, who woke up every day at 5 a.m. to get breakfast ready for everyone. Me, who spent the entire day cleaning, cooking, organizing, taking care of my little grandson Antonio when he came home from school. Me, lazy, I swallowed my tears at that moment. I didn't want them to know I had listened. Silently, I went back to the kitchen, placed the tray on the sink, and stared out the window at the city lights. I remembered my whole life dedicated to my family. I remembered when I became a widow 5 years ago and how hard it was to move on alone. I recalled when Marcelo insisted I sell my little house in Copacabana and move in with them. "Mom, you can't be alone," he said, "come live with us, it will be good for everyone." And I believed him that night. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed with his words hammering in my head. I thought about my life as an accountant. The 40 years I worked to support the household after my husband died, leaving me with 2 small children to raise. I thought about how I managed to pay for Marcelo's private college, how I saved every penny to give him a better future than mine. And now, in old age, when I should be cared for and respected, I heard that. The night dragged on. From my bedroom window, I watched the sky slowly change color. That's when I made a decision I never thought I would. I was going to disappear, simply vanish for a few days. I would let them feel what life was like without the old lazy woman. Maybe then they would appreciate everything I did silently every day. When the alarm went off at 5, as usual, I got up. But instead of going to the kitchen to make coffee, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the picture of my late husband on the nightstand. "What would you do, Arnaldo?" I asked softly. Silence was the only answer, but somehow I felt he would approve of my decision. I waited for everyone to leave the house. Marcelo and Patricia always left at 7:30. He for the real estate office, she for the architecture studio. Little Antonio, my 8-year-old grandson, left at 8 for school, taken by the school van. I always said goodbye to him at the door with a kiss and a homemade snack that I prepared with love. That day, I did everything as usual, but with a lump in my throat. "Grandma, are you sad?" Antonio asked with those sharp little eyes that always saw beyond what I showed. "No, my love, just a little tired," I replied, forcing a smile. "Go on, the van is already waiting." He gave me a tight hug before running off. That hug almost made me give up my plan, but I needed to be strong. I wasn't doing this just for myself, but also for the future of my relationship with my son and his family. Some lessons need to be tough to be learned. As soon as the school van turned the corner, I went back inside the apartment and looked around. The living room had the cushions all messed up from when Marcelo watched TV late. The kitchen had the breakfast dishes piled up in the sink, which Patricia always said she would wash later but never did. Their bedroom had an unmade bed and clothes on the floor that I usually picked up to wash. That's when I decided. I would leave everything just as it was. I wouldn't tidy up, wouldn't wash anything, wouldn't clean a thing. I wanted them to come back and find the house exactly as they left it, so they would realize all the work I did that seemed invisible to them. I went to my room and grabbed a small suitcase. I packed only the essentials, some clothes, my blood pressure meds, my documents, and a little money I kept in a box in the closet. I didn't take much, after all, I didn't plan to be gone long. Just enough to give them a scare, to make them appreciate my presence. Before leaving, I called my sister Lucia, who lives in a quiet place in Petropolis. "Lucia, can I stay with you for a few days?" I asked, trying not to show that I was crying. "Clotilde, what happened? Your voice sounds strange." She noticed right away. "I'll tell you when I get there." "Can I come?" "Of course you can, sis. My house has always been yours too." "When will you arrive?" "I'm leaving now. I'll take a bus from the terminal in Nova Friburgo and get there in the early afternoon. I'll wait for you. Take care on the trip." After hanging up, I took one last look at the apartment. In the picture frame on the shelf, a photo of our family from last Christmas. Everyone smiling, seemingly happy. Anyone looking at that image would never imagine what was happening behind those smiles. I sighed deeply, grabbed my suitcase, and left, closing the door without looking back. The ride to the bus terminal was silent. In the taxi, the driver tried to make small talk, but I was too lost in my thoughts to respond with anything more than one-word answers. In my head, I imagined the scene. Marcelo and Patricia coming home from work, realizing I wasn't there. At first, they might not even notice. They'd probably think I went to Praca Tiradentes, where I used to feed the birds, or to Padaria Sabor de Serra, where I sometimes had coffee with my friends. But when night fell and I hadn't returned, when there was no dinner ready, when they noticed that the tasks I always did hadn't been done, that's when they would start to worry. And when the phone rang and I didn't answer, when neighbors were asked and no one knew where I was, despair would start to creep in. On the bus to Petropolis, looking out the window at the landscapes rushing by, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Sad for having reached this point, but determined to make my son realize my worth. Sometimes we only miss something or someone when we lose them. And I wanted my son to miss me, not as a housekeeper keeping things in order, but as his mother, a person deserving of respect and consideration. As the bus wound its way up the curves toward Petropolis, I began to imagine what the next few days would be like. How would he react when the phone started ringing insistently? What would I say when I finally answered? Tears silently streamed down my face as I gazed at the blue sky through the bus window, thinking about how we got to this point. My sister Lucia's place is on a hillside in Petropolis, overlooking the valley and mountains in the distance. When I arrived that afternoon, she was waiting for me on the porch with a pot of chamomile tea. She didn't need to say anything, just opened her arms, and I broke down in tears. After I calmed down, I told her everything that had happened. "But Clotilde, how did you endure this for so long?" Lucia asked, shocked. Her question made me reflect on the last 2 years of my life, how it had been before I heard those cruel words that made me flee my home. In truth, the signs had been there from the start, but I chose to ignore them. After Arnaldo, my husband, passed away from a heart attack 5 years ago, I was alone in our apartment in Copacabana. The first few months were the hardest. I would wake up in the middle of the night and reach out for his side of the bed, only to find emptiness. Losing a partner of 40 years is like losing a part of yourself. In the beginning, my son Marcelo and my daughter-in-law Patricia would visit me almost every weekend, bringing little Antonio along. "Mom, you're so lonely here," Marcelo started to say after a few months. "This apartment is too big for you. Why don't you sell it and come live with us in Grosjean? We have a spare room, and Antonio would love having his grandma around." At first, I resisted. I liked my independence, my mornings on the Copacabana boardwalk, my afternoons playing cards with friends at the community center. But Marcelo insisted with each visit. "Just think about it, Mom. You wouldn't have to worry about bills, heavy shopping, or maintaining the apartment. It would be better for everyone." Patricia smiled and nodded, although now that I think about it, never with much enthusiasm. But it was little Antonio who finally convinced me. "Grandma, please come live with us. We can watch cartoons together every day." How could I resist those little eyes? I eventually gave in. I sold the apartment in Copacabana, which Arnaldo and I had worked so hard for, and transferred the money to a savings account. I didn't give anything to Marcelo, even though he hinted that I could help with their house renovations. The money is your future, your security, I argued at the time. I'm glad I did that. The move to their house happened exactly 2 years and 3 months ago. At first, everything seemed perfect. My room was smaller than the one in Copacabana, but it was comfortable. It had a window that overlooked a small garden in the back, where I planted some herbs and flowers. The mornings with Antonio, before he went to school, were precious. We read together. I told him stories from my childhood in Minas Gerais, teaching him words that are no longer used. But as the weeks went by, I began to notice subtle changes. First, there were small comments. "Mom, since you're home all day, could you organize the kitchen drawers?" Marcelo casually asked one day. I saw no problem with it and happily did it. Then came another request. "Mrs. Clotilde, since you're going to the supermarket, could you buy these things for me?" Patricia handed me a list that filled an entire page. Again, I accepted without questioning. After all, I was living with them, right? It was fair to contribute. And so, one request led to another. In less than 3 months, I had taken on practically all the household chores. My day started at 5 a.m., preparing breakfast for everyone, strong coffee for Marcelo, green tea for Patricia, hot chocolate and buttered bread for Antonio. I set the table while they got ready. Then I made the beds, washed the breakfast dishes, and swept the house. Around 10 a.m., I would go to the market or the fair, always carrying heavy bags up the steep hill of Grosjean. I would return home, put away the groceries, and start preparing lunch. Marcelo and Patricia rarely came home for lunch. So, I made packed meals that I kept ready in the fridge, eating alone or sometimes with a neighbor who stopped by for coffee. In the afternoon, I ironed clothes, sewed loose buttons, and organized cabinets. At 3 p.m., Antonio returned from school. I prepared a snack for him, helped with homework, and played a little. Those hours with my grandson were the best of the day. At 6 p.m., I started preparing dinner. Marcelo liked traditional food from Minas, like what I made when he was a child, bean tutu, ribs with cassava, chicken with okra. Patricia preferred lighter dishes. So, many times, I made 2 different dinners. They would arrive around 7:30 p.m., tired and usually in a bad mood. "Mom, this chicken is too dry," Marcelo would complain. "Mrs. Clotilde, I asked for less salt," Patricia would say. I swallowed the criticism and smiled, apologizing. After dinner, while they watched TV in the living room, I washed the dishes, cleaned the kitchen, and prepared lunchboxes for the next day. Around 10 p.m., I could finally retire to my room, exhausted. The weekends weren't much different. Marcelo and Patricia would go out for lunch or visit friends, often leaving Antonio with me. I didn't mind spending time with my grandson. In fact, I loved it, but I started to feel like I was being used as a free babysitter, not as a grandmother. "Mom, do you mind watching Antonio? We have an important event," Marcelo would ask as he was already heading out the door, without waiting for my response. Gradually, I began to notice changes in their behavior towards me. The please and thank you started to disappear. The meals I prepared with so much care began to be received as an obligation, not as a gesture of love. Patricia started making comments about the space my belongings took up. "Mrs. Clotilde, could you please store your sewing things? It gets so messy when I have guests." My space in the house kept shrinking. First, I lost the right to use the living room on the nights when Patricia had friends over for a book club. Then I was kindly informed that I shouldn't use the washing machine on weekends because it uses too much energy. Still, I continued to do everything with love. I took care of that house as if it were still mine, as if I were still caring for my own family, like in the days when Arnaldo was alive and Marcelo was a child. I deceived myself, saying it was just a phase, that they would soon recognize my worth. My friend Sonia, who visited me on Wednesdays for coffee, was the first to notice what was happening. "Clotilde, you're being taken advantage of," she said directly. "They're treating you like a maid, not like a mother and mother-in-law." I defended my son. "Of course. It's not like that, Sonia. They work hard, come home tired. I stay at home anyway. It doesn't cost me anything to help. Helping is one thing, doing everything is another. She insisted. When was the last time your son took you out? When was the last time anyone asked if you were okay, if you needed anything? I couldn't answer. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time Marcelo had shown genuine concern for me. Even when I had a high blood pressure crisis months ago and needed to go to the hospital, he just dropped me off and said he'd come back to pick me up when the doctor cleared me. I was alone for hours in the emergency room at Santa Clara Hospital, but the last straw was when they decided to take a trip to Buzios. Mom, we're going to spend a week at the beach. Marcelo announced one day during dinner. Patricia got a house borrowed from a client. How wonderful, I replied excitedly. It's been so long since I went to the beach. When are we going? The silence that followed was awkward. Marcelo and Patricia exchanged glances. Actually, Mom, we're thinking of just the three of us going. You know how it is? You don't really enjoy the beach, you get tired easily. At that moment, I felt like I had been slapped. Not being invited on the trip was one thing, but assuming I wouldn't want to go, that I would be a burden, was something completely different. I swallowed my tears and limited myself to saying, of course, son, you all deserve some family time. Family time, as if I weren't part of it. In the days leading up to the trip, I went above and beyond. I washed and ironed all the clothes they would take. I packed the bags, prepared snacks for the trip, cleaned the entire house so it would be perfect when they returned. And they barely noticed, they were too busy with preparations, with excitement. The night before the trip, while I was making dinner, I heard Patricia comment to Marcelo in the living room, "Is your mom going to be okay alone? Does she know how to manage?" His response hurt me. Of course she does. She's not helpless, just a bit slow. Sometimes slow. I was the one running around all day to keep that house running. I was the one who still had the energy to tell stories to Antonio before bed, even when exhausted. I slow. They left on a Friday morning. Antonio gave me a tight hug and said he would bring me seashells. That sincere gesture almost made me cry. I stood by the door, waving until the car disappeared around the corner. The house fell silent, empty. For the first time in a long while, I was truly alone. I spent the day wandering through the rooms, feeling an enormous void, without having to cook for anyone, without having to clean what wasn't dirty, without having to hear complaints. It should have been a relief, but it only deepened my sadness. It felt like I had lost my purpose. On Sunday, I received a quick call from Marcelo. Is everything okay there, Mom? Yes, son. Are you having fun? A lot. Antonio won't leave the sea. Patricia ran into some old college friends who are here too. We're having a great time. He didn't ask if I was eating well, if I was feeling lonely, if I needed anything. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. The days dragged on slowly. To pass the time, I started rereading old books I had brought from Copacabana. I found a diary I kept in my early years of marriage, filled with plans and dreams for the future. On one page, I had written, "I want my children to grow up knowing the value of family, respect, and love." That broke my heart. On Wednesday night, a week before they returned from their trip, I was in the kitchen making tea before bed. The house was quiet. Only the ticking of the wall clock marked the passing hours. That's when I heard Marcelo's phone ring in their room. He had forgotten the charger and left the old phone on the bedside table. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but it could be something important for work. I went to the room and picked up the device. On the screen, the name Patricia. I answered. "Hello, Marcelo. I forgot to tell you." Patricia's voice was so cheerful, not realizing it was me. "I found a realtor here who is selling an amazing house in Buzios for a great price. It would be perfect for us to buy and come on weekends." "Patricia, it's Clotilde," I replied. Silence on the other end. Oh, Mrs. Clotilde, I thought it was Marcelo. He left the old phone here. Do you want me to take a message? No, that's okay. I'll talk to him later. Before hanging up, I heard voices in the background, laughter. They were having so much fun without me. I returned to the kitchen with a heavy heart. A house in Buzios? With what money? Were they thinking of using the money from the sale of my apartment? Or worse, were they planning to move and leave me behind? Those questions haunted me all night. The next morning, I made a decision. I called my friend Sonia. I need your help, I told her. Do you still have the contact for that niece of yours who is a lawyer? 2 days later, I was in the office of Dr. Melissa, Sonia's niece. I explained the whole situation and asked about my rights regarding the money from the sale of my apartment. Mrs. Clotilde, you did very well to keep that money in an account solely in your name, she explained. Legally, it's all yours. Your son has no rights to it. That conversation gave me some relief. At least financially, I wasn't completely dependent on them. But the emotional situation remained tough. Each passing day, I felt more invisible, more disposable. It was the night before their return that it happened. I had tidied up the whole house, restocked the fridge, and prepared Antonio's room with the teddy bear he loved so much. I was in the hallway, carrying a tray with tea to my room, when I heard Marcelo answer a call from Patricia on the living room phone. They talked about the trip, the traffic on the way back, and then came the phrase that would change everything. It would be so nice if that old lazy woman just disappeared. The moment I heard that, all the love, all the dedication, all the sacrifices I had made for them seemed to evaporate. In its place was only a deep pain and a certainty. I needed to value myself. I needed to show them what it meant to live without me. And that's how I decided to disappear. That night was the longest of my life. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I mentally replayed the last few years. As a mother, I always believed a child's love was unconditional, just like mine for him. But Marcelo's words proved me wrong, old, lazy. Each syllable echoed in my mind like a hammer, slowly breaking the image I had of our family. Through my bedroom window, I watched the sky change from black to dark blue, then to a shade of lilac, until the first rays of sunlight began to appear. I didn't sleep a wink. The decision was made, but I needed to plan carefully. I got up earlier than usual that morning. Instead of 5, I woke up at 4. I took a long shower, feeling the warm water flow over my tired body. I dressed carefully, choosing comfortable clothes for the trip. I brushed my gray hair in front of the mirror, noticing the wrinkles marking my face. Each one held a story, a moment of joy or sadness. Many of them had come in recent years, taking care of my ungrateful family. I went to the kitchen and, out of habit, almost started making breakfast. I stopped halfway. No, Clotilde, I told myself softly. Not today. Instead, I made just a strong coffee for myself. I sat at the kitchen table and savored each sip in silence, enjoying that moment of peace before the storm I was about to create. Around 6, I began to pack my bag. I wouldn't take much, just the essentials. A few changes of clothes, my medications for blood pressure and cholesterol, basic hygiene products. I also grabbed the little wooden box where I kept some savings, about 1,000 Brazilian reals I had set aside from small sewing jobs I did for the neighbors. I hesitated as I looked at the family photos on the dresser. I ended up taking just one, of me and Antonio on his last birthday. My grandson was the only one who truly valued me in that house. I looked around the room at the objects that told the story of my life. The crochet blanket I made during Marcelo's pregnancy, the book stacked on the table, the rosary my mother gave me over 50 years ago. I decided to leave it all behind. I would take only what fit in the small suitcase and my bag. The rest, well, they could decide what to do with it. At exactly 7, I heard movement in the couple's room. It was Marcelo getting up for work. Soon, Patricia would be up too, complaining, as always, about the weak coffee or the bread not being at the right temperature. And at 8, my little Antonio would be woken up to go to school. The routine I knew so well, of which I was a part like an old piece of furniture, always present but rarely noticed. I quickly put the suitcase in the closet. I didn't want anyone to see me packing. I pretended everything was normal and went to the kitchen to make breakfast, just like I always did. But today, something felt different. Every gesture was calculated, almost mechanical. I didn't put any love into the toast I made, nor did I care if the coffee was how Marcelo liked it. I simply fulfilled my duty one last time. "Good morning, Mom." Marcelo walked into the kitchen adjusting his tie. His eyes didn't even meet mine. "Good morning," I replied curtly, placing the coffee cup in front of him. He seemed to notice something odd in my tone, as he lifted his gaze for a second, but quickly returned to his phone, checking emails, ignoring my presence. Patricia came in right after, rushed as always. "Good morning, Mrs. Clotilde," she said, grabbing a piece of toast. "Could you pick up my blue blouse from the laundry today? I need it for a meeting tomorrow." I almost laughed at the irony. She had no idea that tomorrow there would be no one to fetch her precious blouse. "Of course, Patricia," I replied with a forced smile. The last to enter was Antonio, still sleepy, dragging his feet. His little face lit up when he saw me, and he ran to give me a hug. The only genuine gesture of affection I would receive that morning. "Grandma, did you make pancakes?" he asked hopefully. "Not today, my love, but I promise I'll make them one of these days." A promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The thought of leaving him broke my heart, but it was necessary. Sometimes we need to be cruel to those we love to teach a bigger lesson. Their departure was the hardest moment. Marcelo grabbed his briefcase, Patricia her bag, and Antonio his colorful backpack. They said goodbye like any normal day. Marcelo with a distant wave, Patricia with a "see you later," and Antonio with a kiss planted on my cheek. "Grandma, will you be here when I get back from school?" he asked, as if sensing something. I swallowed hard before answering, feeling tears threatening to rise. "One day I will always be waiting for you, my love. Never forget that." He frowned, confused by my cryptic response, but soon smiled and ran to catch up with his parents who were already in the elevator. When the door closed, leaving me alone in that silent apartment, I felt a mix of relief and fear. There was no turning back, the decision was made. I picked up the phone and dialed my sister Lucia's number. I would need a place to stay, and her farm in Petropolis would be perfect, far enough not to be easily found, but still in the state of Rio. "Hello, Lucia, it's me, Clotilde." "CLO, what a surprise. How are you?" My sister's cheerful voice sounded comforting. "Actually, not well. I need your help. Can I come stay with you for a few days?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Lucia and I had always been close, and she could sense when something was very wrong. "What happened, Clotilde?" "It's Marcelo. I'll tell you everything in person. I just need to know if I can stay with you for a while." "Of course, you can, sis. My home is your home. When do you want to come?" "Today, right now. Another longer break this time." "Is it that urgent?" "Clotilde? You're scaring me." "Don't worry. I'm not sick or anything. I just need to get out of here." I explained that I would catch a bus to Petropolis that very morning and would arrive in the early afternoon. Lucia, always practical, said she would prepare the guest room and make a special lunch. I thanked her, touched by her willingness to welcome me without asking too many questions. After hanging up, I looked at the clock. 8:30, I had little time before any of them returned or called. I rushed to grab my already packed suitcase and took one last look at the apartment. That's when I made another impulsive decision, but one that would be part of my silent revenge. I would leave the house exactly as they used to leave it for me. The beds would remain unmade. The dirty breakfast dishes would stay in the sink, clothes scattered on the bathroom floor, Antonio's toys in the hallway. I wanted them to feel what it was like to live in the mess I always cleaned up without complaining. Satisfied with my little act of rebellion, I grabbed my suitcase and bag and left, closing the door without looking back. In the elevator, I ran into Mrs. Ivone, the neighbor from 302. "Going on a trip, Mrs. Clotilde?" she asked, curiously eyeing my suitcase. "I'm visiting my sister for a few days," I replied vaguely. "That's great, you deserve a break. Those relatives of yours take too much advantage of you." I looked at her in surprise, so others noticed too. I smiled sadly and just nodded. At the ground floor, I said goodbye to her and walked to the taxi stand on the corner. I didn't want to risk taking the bus or subway with my suitcase, even though it was small. The taxi driver, an older gentleman close to my age, was friendly during the ride to the bus terminal in Nova Friburgo. "Where are you headed?" he asked, trying to make conversation. "Petropolis, I'm visiting my sister." "How nice." "Petropolis is a beautiful city. Are you going to stay there long?" The question caught me off guard. How long would I be away? I hadn't thought about that. "I'm not sure. Maybe a few days, maybe more." He nodded, respecting my vague tone, and we continued in silence. Looking out the taxi window, I watched Rio de Janeiro pass by. The city that had always been my home now felt strange, almost hostile. Or was it me who was changing? At the terminal, I bought a ticket for the next bus. I was lucky. It would leave in half an hour. I sat on a waiting bench, watching the flow of people coming and going. Families saying goodbye, couples reuniting, elderly folks traveling alone, each with their own story, their joys and sorrows. While I waited, my phone rang. It was Marcelo. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. The phone silenced only to ring again seconds later. This time, I turned it off completely. He would have to wait for my explanations. The bus to Petropolis was comfortable, with reclining seats and air conditioning. I sat by the window, placed my small suitcase in the overhead compartment, and settled in for the approximately 2-hour journey. When the engine started and the vehicle began to move, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was the sensation of freedom, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. The road to Petropolis is winding, climbing the mountains with its tight turns and breathtaking views. As the bus gained altitude, the air became cooler and the landscape changed. The tall buildings of the city gave way to the lush vegetation of the Atlantic forest. Each curve revealed a more beautiful panorama than the last. Since I hadn't taken this route in years, I was amazed by the beauty I had forgotten. My mind, however, wandered between the past and the uncertain future. How would Marcelo and Patricia react when they noticed my absence? At first, they probably wouldn't even notice. They might think I had gone to the market or the square, but when night fell and I hadn't returned, when there was no dinner prepared, when they called and my phone was off, that's when the panic would begin. Imagining the scene gave me an almost perverse satisfaction. Marcelo, always so composed, would lose his cool. Patricia, so organized at work but a mess at home, would have to deal with the accumulated chaos. And little Antonio, well, he would be the only one I truly felt remorse for. Halfway to Petropolis, I decided to turn my phone back on, just to check. There were 12 missed calls from Marcelo, 5 from Patricia, and 3 text messages. I opened the first one. "Mom, where are you? I called Mrs. Ivone, and she said you left with a suitcase. What's going on?" The second was more urgent. "Mom, please answer the phone. We're worried. You never leave without telling us." And the third, sent just a few minutes earlier. "Mom, I'm leaving work now and heading home. Please call me as soon as you read this message." I smiled sadly. So they had noticed my absence quicker than I expected. Probably Patricia had called mid-morning to ask for another favor, and when she couldn't reach me, she alerted Marcelo. I turned my phone off again, without responding. It wasn't time yet. The bus arrived at the Petropolis bus station shortly after noon. The mountain air was fresh and clean, so different from the pollution of the river. I took a deep breath, feeling rejuvenated just to be there. I grabbed my suitcase and got off, looking for a taxi to take me to Lucia's place. My sister lived in a more remote area, in a small farm inherited from our father. It was a simple but charming place, with a wooden house, a flower garden, and a breathtaking view of the valley. Lucia, 2 years older than me, had chosen the tranquility of the countryside after retiring as a nurse. A widow like me, she found comfort in nature that I sought in family. Perhaps she had made the wiser choice. The taxi climbed a dirt road for about 20 minutes before reaching the farm gate. I paid the fare and walked along the stone path to the house. Before I even knocked on the door, Lucia appeared on the porch, arms open in a silent invitation. I ran to her like a child runs to their mother after a scare. We embraced tightly, without saying a word. We didn't need words. We were sisters, sharing the same story, the same genes, the same understanding of the world. When we finally parted, she held my face in her wrinkled hands, examining me with sharp eyes. "You look thinner, Clotilde, and you have deep dark circles. What did that boy do this time?" "Boy?" That's how she referred to Marcelo, even though he was over 40. To Lucia, he would always be the spoiled little kid who cried over anything. "Shall we go inside?" I replied. "I'll tell you everything while we eat. I'm starving." Lucia's house was cozy, with well-preserved antique furniture, lace curtains at the windows, and the unmistakable smell of home-cooked food in the air. A feast awaited me on the kitchen table. Country chicken with okra, polenta, sautéed collard greens, white rice, and a pitcher of freshly squeezed orange juice. Menaire food, the food of our childhood. As we ate, I recounted everything that had happened. The exhausting routine at Marcelo's house, the little disrespectful acts that piled up, the trip to Buzio's I was excluded from, and finally, the words that made me decide to leave. It would be so nice if that lazy old woman just disappeared. As I repeated the phrase, my voice faltered, and the tears I had held back throughout the trip finally came pouring out. I cried like I hadn't since Arnaldo died. A cry of disappointment, of deep hurt, of late recognition, of a painful truth. My son didn't love me the way I loved him. Lucia, always practical, didn't try to console me with empty words. She simply held my hand across the table and waited for the storm to pass. When I finally calmed down, she got up, went to a cabinet, and returned with a bottle of unforgettable liqueur she made herself. "I think we need something stronger than juice," she said, pouring 2 small glasses. "To your courage, my sister." We toasted and drank the sweet, strong liqueur. The warmth of the drink went down my throat, bringing momentary comfort. "You know what hurts me the most, Lucia? It's not his words. It's realizing I dedicated my life to a son who doesn't appreciate me. I raised him alone after Arnaldo died. I worked twice as hard to give him everything I could, and now in my old age, when I should be cared for, I'm treated like a burden." Lucia felt understanding. "It's the story of many women from our generation, CLO. We sacrifice for our children, for our husbands, for the home, and when we grow old, we are discarded. But you did the right thing by leaving. They need to learn to value you. Do you think they will learn? Either they learn, or they lose you. And if they lose you, they will be the real losers." After lunch, Lucia showed me the room where I would stay. It was simple but comfortable, with a double bed covered by a patchwork quilt, an old dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard orchard. I unpacked my suitcase, putting the few clothes I brought in the dresser. "Stay as long as you need," Lucia said from the door. "My home is your home." I thanked her with a silent hug. Then, exhausted from the night, sleepless and from the trip, I lay down for a well-deserved rest. For the first time in years, I slept without worries, without the weight of obligations, without the fear of not being enough. I slept like a free woman. It was the beginning of my new life, away from those who didn't value me. A life where I would discover my own worth. The first full day at Lucia's place felt like a balm for my wounded soul. I woke up naturally, without an alarm, to the sound of birds singing through the window, along with the golden morning sunlight. For a moment, I felt disoriented, not recognizing where I was. Then, memories of the previous day came flooding back, bringing with them a strange mix of freedom and guilt. I got up slowly, feeling my body ache after such deep sleep. How long had it been since I slept so well? Years, maybe. At Marcelo's house, I was always on alert, even in my sleep, waiting to hear if Antonio needed something or if I had to get up before everyone else to make coffee. I put on a robe that Luzia had left for me and headed to the kitchen. My sister was already up, preparing a breakfast that looked like a feast. Homemade bread, fresh butter, minus cheese, cornmeal cake, fruits picked from the orchard, and freshly brewed coffee. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said with a smile. "It's almost 10 o'clock. I thought you were going to sleep all day." 10 o'clock? I exclaimed, genuinely shocked. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept in so late. "Why didn't you wake me?" "And why would I?" "You're on vacation, Clotilde. A vacation from life, from routine, from obligations. Here, no one will demand anything from you." I sat at the table, still absorbing this new reality. Vacation? Yes. That's how I should view this time, a time for myself, to reconnect with who I was, to remember who Clotilde de Fernandez was, beyond being a mother, grandmother, and unpaid worker. The breakfast was delicious, but even more delightful was the conversation with Luzia. We talked about our childhood in Minas, reminisced about our parents, laughed at memories that had long been buried. It was as if time had turned back, and we were once again those carefree girls running through the fields. After breakfast, Luzia suggested a walk around the property. It wasn't large, but it was full of charm, a flower garden in front of the house, a small orchard in the back with jabuticaba, guava, and orange trees. A well-tended vegetable garden, and best of all, a stunning view of the valley and the distant mountains. "I wake up every day to this view and I still get emotional," Luzia commented as we walked. I understood perfectly what she meant. There was something magical about that place, a renewing energy that emanated from the surrounding nature. The sounds, the scents, the colors, everything was invigorating. By late morning, my phone, which had been off since the trip, seemed to be calling me. I was curious about Marcelo and Patricia's reaction to my absence, but the fear of breaking that newfound peace was greater. Luzia noticed my hesitation. "You don't have to call if you don't want to," she said. "They can wait." "But what if they're really worried?" "Let them worry a bit. Maybe it's the only way for them to realize how important you are." I ultimately decided to keep the phone off for a while longer. This was my moment, my refuge. I didn't want Marcelo's voice, whether in concern or anger, to interrupt my healing. In the late afternoon, Luzia had an idea that would completely change my perspective on those days of absence. "There's a group of friends that meets every Wednesday to play cards at Solange's house nearby. Do you want to come with me today?" I hesitated. Socializing wasn't in my plans. I wanted to be alone, to lick my wounds in peace, but Luzia's hopeful gaze made me give in. Maybe a little different company would be good. The group consisted of 5 ladies, all in their 70s, widows like us. Solange, the host, a former literature teacher with a sharp sense of humor. Teresa, a former secretary at a law firm, always elegant even in informal situations. Marta, who had been a hairdresser her whole life and still offered opinions on everyone's hair. Olga, an Italian immigrant who came to Brazil as a child and kept her accent and fiery temperament. And now, Luzia and I, folks, this is my sister Clotilde, who is staying with me, introduced me to Luzia. I was welcomed with warm hugs and sincere questions about my life. I didn't go into detail about why I was there. I just said I was taking some time for myself after years of caring for my son's house. "Oh, I know that story well," said Olga, shaking her head. "My son also invited me to live with him after Diane passed away. I lasted 2 weeks there. On the first Sunday without a ready meal, he got the message and found me an apartment near his place." They all laughed, and I felt something unexpected. Understanding? Those women knew exactly what I was going through without me needing to explain. Each, in her own way, had faced the challenge of aging in a society that undervalues the elderly, especially elderly women. The evening was surprisingly fun. We played cards, ate treats prepared by everyone, drank wine, and talked about everything. From politics to recipes, from ungrateful children to new crushes, a word I learned that night to my delight. I returned to Lucia's place feeling lighter, as if I had found a new tribe. The next day, I woke up with a fixed idea. I wanted to see how my phone was doing. Curiosity finally won, and after breakfast, I sat on the porch and turned it on. Immediately, a flood of notifications filled the screen. 27 missed calls from Marcelo, 15 from Patricia, 3 from Antonio's school, and dozens of text messages. The first messages were just questions about my whereabouts. Then the tone shifted to concern, then anger, and finally desperation. The last message from Marcelo, sent at 11 p.m. the night before, said, "Mom, for God's sake, give us news. We've already gone to the police to report your disappearance. We're all desperate. Antonio won't stop crying." I felt a pang in my heart reading about my grandson. I didn't want to hurt him. That was never my intention. My issue was with Marcelo and Patricia, not with that innocent child. But before I could decide whether to respond or not, the phone rang in my hand. It was Marcelo. My heart raced. I answered. "Hello, Mom?" His voice came out almost like a shout. "Is it really you? Where are you? We're crazy with worry." "I'm fine, Marcelo. I'm at your Aunt Lucia's house in Petropolis." "In Petropolis? What are you doing there? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "We had to go to the police. We've been looking for you for 2 days." I took a deep breath before responding. It was the moment of truth. "I left because I heard what you said to Patricia the night before your trip about how nice it would be if that lazy old woman disappeared." For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I didn't want to. It wasn't." "Don't try to deny it, Marcelo. I heard you clearly. And that was just the last straw. For a long time I've been treated like a maid in your house, not like your mother. I decided to give you what you wanted. The lazy old woman is gone." Another silence, this time broken by a heavy sigh. "You're right," he finally said. His voice was different, almost unrecognizable. "I've been a terrible son. We've treated you badly. We took everything for granted, but please come home. I promise things will change." "No, Marcelo, I'm not coming back now. I need time for myself, to think, to decide what I want to do with my life moving forward." "How long?" "I don't know. Maybe a few days, maybe more. Antonio is inconsolable. He misses you so much." That felt like a stab. My grandson's suffering because of me, but I needed to be strong. "Tell him Grandma is fine, just taking a vacation, and I'll be back to see him soon." "Mom, please don't insist, Marcelo. My decision is made. Take this as a lesson. A lesson about valuing people while they're still around." I hung up before he could argue more. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking, but I felt strangely empowered. For the first time in years, I was in control of the situation. Lucia, who had listened to everything from the kitchen door, came to sit beside me on the porch. "How do you feel?" she asked simply, as if she had just jumped out of a plane without a parachute but somehow knew she would land safely. She smiled understandingly, and we sat there watching the hummingbirds visiting the flowers in the garden, each lost in their own thoughts. On the third day, I started getting more involved in the routine of the farm. I woke up early and helped Lucia in the garden, getting my hands dirty for the first time in years. There was something deeply therapeutic about feeling the texture of the soil, pulling out weeds, and seeing the vegetables grow strong and healthy. "You've always had a green thumb," Lucia commented as I watered the lettuce plants. "Remember when Mom gave us a little spot in the yard to plant whatever we wanted? Yours turned into a mess of flowers, and mine became a mini orchard. You've always been the practical one in the family." I, the dreamer. We laughed, reminiscing about our distant childhood. The mention of our mother brought another memory. Lucia, do you think Mom would be proud of us? Of what we've become? My sister stopped digging in the dirt and looked at me seriously. I'm sure she would. You raised a child on your own, worked your whole life, never gave up even in tough times, and now you're having the courage to value yourself, to say, enough. This takes strength, Clotilde, a strength that comes from her, that runs in our blood. Her words touched my heart deeply. Mom had also been a strong woman, raising 2 daughters practically alone after Dad's untimely death. Perhaps this strength was indeed an inheritance, a family trait I had temporarily forgotten. In the afternoon, we went to downtown Petropolis to shop. The city was beautiful, with its historic buildings and tree-lined streets. We walked by the Imperial Museum, admiring the architecture and gardens. There was a temporary exhibition about remarkable Brazilian women, and we spent hours reading about the lives of those pioneers who challenged the conventions of their times to follow their own paths. Inspiring, isn't it? Lucia commented as we read about Inês de Silveira, a psychiatrist who revolutionized the treatment of psychiatric patients in Brazil. It makes you think about what you could have done if you had more courage, more support. It's never too late, Chloe. Iris Apfel started a fashion career at 84. I left the museum with a renewed sense of possibilities. Perhaps at 68, there was still a new chapter waiting to be written in the story of my life. On our way back to the farm, we found a surprise. A huge bouquet of flowers on the porch along with a basket of fine chocolates and a card. It was from Marcelo. The card simply said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I miss you." We all do. I looked at those expensive gifts and felt a pang of irritation. It was typical of Marcelo to think he could buy his way back into my heart. He had always been like that, since he was a boy. When he did something wrong, he tried to make up for it with gifts instead of a sincere apology. "What are you going to do with that?" Lucia asked, pointing at the bouquet. "I'll put the flowers in water, they're beautiful and not to blame. We can eat the chocolates as a way to forgive." "Well, that will take more time." On the 4th day, Lucia needed to go to town for a routine medical appointment. I was alone at the farm for the first time, and the solitude was welcome. I spent the morning exploring the surroundings, walking around the property, discovering little corners I hadn't noticed before. There was a stream at the back of the land with crystal-clear water flowing over smooth stones. I sat by its edge, listening to the soothing sound of the water. It was there, in that serene place, that I began to take a real inventory of my life. I had worked hard as an accountant for 4 decades, raised a son who, despite recent troubles, had become a successful professional. I had been a devoted wife to Arnaldo, with whom I shared 40 years of an imperfect but loving union. I had friends, some now distant since I moved to Marcelo's house, but still there, still in my heart. So what was I missing? Why did I feel so empty? So disposable? The answer came like a whisper from the stream. I had lost myself. At some point in my journey, I stopped being Clotilde, the woman, and became just the mother, the grandmother, the mother-in-law, the helper. I had abdicated my own dreams, desires, and needs to fulfill those of others. And when you erase yourself for long enough, the people around you begin to see you only as a function, not as a complete human being. This revelation brought tears to my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness, they were of understanding, acceptance, and above all, determination. It was time to find myself again. I returned home with a new energy and decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Cook for pleasure, not out of obligation. I searched through Lucia's pantry and found ingredients to make a dish my mother always prepared for special occasions. Chicken in dark sauce with polenta. It was laborious and time-consuming, but I had all the time in the world. As I cooked, I hummed old songs from Minas that were part of my childhood soundtrack. Every gesture in the kitchen felt like a dance, fluid and enjoyable. The smell filling the house was the aroma of my own story, my cultural heritage. When Lucia returned from town, she found the table set with care, using the good dishes she saved for guests, with the steaming chicken at the center. Wow, Clotilde, what's this? It's a celebration, I simply replied. Of what? Of my rediscovery. Lucia didn't ask anything more, just smiled, as if she understood perfectly, and maybe she really did. After all, we were sisters. The dinner was delicious, and the conversation flowed like the wine that accompanied the meal. We talked about everything, old dreams, desires we never had the courage to pursue, regrets we carried, but also joys, achievements, and loves. It was a conversation between two fulfilled women, not two tired old ladies. On the fifth day, my friend Sonia called. She had found out where I was through Marcelo, who was desperately looking for me. Clotilde, you're causing quite a stir here in Rio, she said with laughter. Marcelo is turning the neighborhood upside down looking for you. He even went to Praca Tiradentes to ask those old men playing dominoes if they had seen you. And what did you tell him? I asked curiously, not knowing anything, but I promised that if I heard from him, I would let him know I was okay. Thank you, Sonia. You're a true friend. So, how are you feeling about this getaway? Like a runaway teenager, I confessed with a laugh, but also like a woman who is finally finding herself. It's strange, Sonia. I'm 68 years old, and only now am I understanding who I really am. It's never too late, my dear. Never. After hanging up, I reflected on Marcelo's desperation. Part of me felt a nearly perverse pleasure in knowing he was suffering, searching for me everywhere. It was a silent revenge for the words spoken, for the lack of consideration. But another part, the mother I would always be, suffered knowing he was distressed. On the sixth day, I decided it was time to take the next step. I couldn't stay indefinitely at Lucia's place, living in that limbo. I needed to make decisions about my future. I've been thinking, I told Lucia over breakfast. I'm going to call Marcelo today and set up a meeting. Are you going back to his house? She asked, concerned. I don't know yet. It depends on our conversation, but something needs to change. That's for sure. I picked up the phone and, taking a deep breath, dialed Marcelo's number. When he answered, his voice sounded different, choked, tired, almost unrecognizable. Mom, is it really you? Yes, it's me, I replied, maintaining the calm I had cultivated over the past few days. Thank God. You have no idea how hellish it's been without you here. The house is a complete chaos. Antonio won't stop crying, asking for his grandmother. Patricia and I can barely handle everything. For a moment, I almost gave in to the maternal urge to comfort him, to say that everything was fine, that I would return and set things right. But something inside me, perhaps the new Clotilde I was discovering, held me back. Marcelo, we need to talk. In person. Can you come to Petropolis on Sunday? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sunday? But that's in 3 days. Can't you come back sooner? No, Marcelo. I need this time. Sunday, at Aunt Lucia's place, at 10 a.m. Bring Patricia and Antonio if you want. My tone left no room for negotiation. For the first time in my life, I was putting my needs ahead of his. The silence that followed told me he got the message. All right, Mom. We'll be there on Sunday. When I hung up, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The next 3 days would be crucial for me to prepare for that confrontation. I didn't want to be driven by hurt or resentment. I wanted clarity, firmness, and above all, honesty with myself and with them. And then? Lucia asked, who had been listening to my conversation from the kitchen door. They're coming on Sunday, I replied. I have until then to decide what I want to do with my life moving forward. My sister smiled, a smile full of pride. You know what I think, Clotilde? That you already know what you want. You just need to find the courage to admit it. Maybe she was right. Deep down in my heart, an idea had been forming since I arrived in Petropolis, but I hadn't dared to fully verbalize it yet. In the days that followed, I continued my routine at the farm, but with a more defined purpose. Every activity, every conversation with Lucia, every moment of solitary reflection helped me crystallize my thoughts and desires. On Friday, Lucia suggested a different outing. "Let's go to the city, I want to show you something." Intrigued, I agreed. We took a taxi to the center of Petropolis and walked to a charming street filled with small shops and cafes. Lucia stopped in front of an old, well-preserved house with a sign that read, Antigo de Serra, Inn and Café. "This is where I want to take you," she said, pushing the door open. The interior was cozy, with restored antique furniture, lace curtains at the windows, and a delightful aroma of freshly brewed coffee and cake in the oven. A white-haired lady, about our age, came to greet us with a warm smile. "Lucia, how nice to see you, dear. And this must be your sister." "Yes, Bernadette. This is Clotilde, my younger sister." "Clotilde, this is Bernadette, my water aerobics friend and the owner of this wonderful inn." I greeted Bernadette, still not quite understanding the purpose of this visit. Lucia seemed to have a plan, and I was curious to find out what it was. Bernadette led us to a table by the window, where we could see a well-kept garden in the back of the property. She served us coffee and generous slices of carrot cake with chocolate. "So, Clotilde," Bernadette began after a few minutes of small talk. "Lucia told me you're an excellent cook." "Well, I like to cook," I replied modestly. "And you worked as an accountant, so you understand management numbers?" "Yes, I worked as an accountant for 40 years. "Interesting," she said, exchanging a knowing glance with Lucia. "You know, I'm looking for someone to help me here at the inn. Someone who can handle the accounts, assist in the kitchen during breakfast, and occasionally greet the guests. It would only be part-time, 5 hours a day. Would you be interested?" I was stunned. A job at 68, when everyone told me it was time to rest, to be taken care of. The offer was so unexpected that I was speechless for a few moments. "Bernadette, I don't even know what to say. I didn't expect this." "You don't have to answer now," she said with an understanding smile. "Think about it. The position is open. And after what Lucia told me about you, I think you'd be perfect for the role." The rest of the visit passed in a blur. Bernadette showed us the inn. The 6 charming rooms, each decorated with a different theme. The spacious kitchen where breakfasts were prepared. The small office where the administration was done. With each new space, I imagined myself working there, being useful, being valued. On the way back to the farm, I turned to Lucia in the back seat of the taxi. "You set all this up, didn't you?" She shrugged with a mischievous smile. "I just connected 2 people who could help each other. Bernadette really needs someone reliable to assist her. And you need a new purpose." It was a happy coincidence. Coincidence or not, that visit planted a powerful seed in my mind. And throughout Saturday, while I helped Lucia prepare the house for Marcelo and his family's visit the next day, the idea grew, taking shape, becoming more and more concrete. On Sunday, I woke up before dawn. My nerves kept me from sleeping past 5 a.m. I got up quietly so I wouldn't wake Lucia and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Sitting at the table, with the steaming cup in my hands, I gazed at the sky slowly brightening. It was the day of truth, the day I would face my son and say everything that had been stuck in my throat for years. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary for me, for him, for our relationship. At 7, Lucia joined me, saying nothing, just squeezing my shoulder in a silent gesture of support. We began preparing a special lunch, chicken with piqui, bean tutu, sautéed collard greens, white rice, the traditional dishes from our childhood that Marcelo loved so much. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Lucia asked at one point, noticing my dedication in the kitchen. "It's not like they deserve a feast after what they did." "I'm not doing this for them," I replied, stirring the beans cooking on the stove. "I'm doing it for me. Because I love to cook, because these dishes connect me to our roots, to Mom, to our history. It's my way of strengthening myself for what's ahead." Lucia nodded, understanding perfectly. It was one of the things I loved most about my sister, her ability to read between the lines, to respect my processes without judgment. At 9:45, we heard the sound of a car approaching on the dirt road. My heart raced. I dried my hands on the apron, took one last look at Lucia, who gave me an encouraging wave, and headed to the porch. Marcelo's car parked in front of the house. The driver's door opened, and my son stepped out, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Patricia got out from the passenger side with an anxious expression, and then the back door opened, and Antonio jumped out, his little eyes searching frantically until he found me on the porch. "Grandma," he shouted, running toward me. I bent down to welcome him into my open arms, feeling the impact of his small body against mine, his arms squeezing my neck tightly, as if he feared I might disappear again. "Grandma, you're back? I missed you so much." Tears filled my eyes, and for a moment, all the resentment, all the hurt, all the determination I had built seemed to dissolve in the warmth of that sincere hug, but I couldn't allow myself that weakness. "Not now." "I missed you too, my love," I replied, kissing his forehead. "But I'm not back yet. We're just talking today." His face twisted in disappointment, and I felt my heart tighten. Marcelo and Patricia approached slowly, as if walking on eggshells. "Mom," Marcelo said, his voice shaky. "Hello, Marcelo, Patricia," I greeted, keeping my voice steady. "Please, come in. Lucia is waiting for us inside." The atmosphere during lunch was tense, almost palpable. Antonio, oblivious to the adult complexities, was the only one chatting animatedly, talking about school, how his dad burned the rice trying to cook, how he missed my bedtime stories. Marcelo barely touched his food, even though it was his favorite. Patricia ate in silence, avoiding my gaze. Lucia, bless her heart, did her best to keep the conversation flowing, asking about their trip, their work, and trivialities that served as a fragile bridge over the chasm separating us. After dessert, a pumpkin sweet with coconut that I had prepared in the morning, Lucia offered to take Antonio to see the creek at the back of the property. I understood her intention. It was time for the serious talk, and it would be better without the little one around. As soon as we were alone, Marcelo broke the silence. "Mom, I don't even know where to start. What I said, what you heard was unforgivable." I was stressed, tired. I spoke without thinking. "You are not what I said." "But is that how you see me, Marcelo?" I replied calmly. "Maybe not consciously, but deep down, that's how you view me. An old woman who only serves to take care of the house, cook, be your son's babysitter, a person with no desires of her own, no life beyond the walls of your home." He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, signaling that I wasn't finished yet. "When your father died, and you suggested I move in with you, I believed it was out of concern, out of love, but now I see there was a practical interest too. You needed someone to take care of the house, to be with Antonio, to do all those tasks that neither you nor Patricia want to do." Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair but kept her gaze low. "I'm not saying you don't love me, Marcelo. I know you love me in your own way, but love without respect isn't enough. And that's what was missing in our relationship. Respect for my individuality, for my desires, for my worth as a human being, not just as a mother or grandmother." Marcelo looked devastated. His tear-filled eyes reminded me of the boy he once was, crying over a scraped knee or a broken toy. But he was no longer a boy, and I was no longer willing to fix everything with a kiss and a hug. "What do you want us to do?" he finally asked, his voice trembling. "How can we fix this?" I took a deep breath. It was time for the truth. "I'm not going back to your house, Marcelo. Not under the same conditions as before. In fact, I don't think I'm going back at all. These days here in Petropolis have shown me that I still have so much to live, so much to discover about myself. I received a job offer at a local inn, and I'm thinking of accepting it." "A job?" he exclaimed, incredulous. "Mom, you're 68 years old. You don't need to work. We can take care of you." "That's exactly the problem, Marcelo. I don't want to be taken care of like I'm an invalid. I want to take care of myself, make my own choices, live my life on my terms." and yes, at 68, I'm still perfectly capable of working, contributing, being useful. Patricia, who had been silent until then, surprised me by speaking up. Mrs. Clotilde, we really are very sorry. The house has turned into chaos without you. Only now do we realize how much we depended on everything you did, often without even thanking you. She hesitated as if choosing her words carefully. If you don't want to live with us again, we understand and respect that, but at least let us help you financially. You don't have to work if you don't want to. I appreciate the offer, Patricia, but it's not about money. I have my retirement and the money from the sale of my apartment. I don't need your financial help. What I needed was recognition, respect, to be seen as a person, not as a household utility. Marcelo ran his hands over his face, a gesture that reminded me so much of his father. Arnaldo did exactly the same when he found himself in a tough situation. And what about Antonio? He asked. He misses you so much, cries every night. That hit me hard. My grandson, the light of my life. Would it be fair to deprive him of my presence because of his parents' mistakes? Antonio will always be my beloved grandson, and I will never stop being his grandmother. If I stay in Petropolis, he can come visit me on weekends, and during school vacations, he can spend time with me. I'm not disappearing from his life, I'm just reorganizing how we relate to each other. Marcelo nodded slowly, finally understanding that my decision was made. There was sadness in his eyes, but also a glimpse of acceptance. And what about your things? He asked. Your furniture, your clothes, your personal belongings can be sent here, or I can pick them up when I'm settled. I still hadn't decided if I would live with Luzia or rent a small place for myself near the inn. A heavy silence fell over the table. It was as if we were all digesting what had just been decided. The end of an era, the beginning of another. It was Patricia who broke the silence. Surprisingly, Mrs. Clotilde, no matter where you live or what you decide to do, we want you to know that you will always be welcome in our home. Not as the person who takes care of everything, but as a special guest, like family. We learned the lesson in the hardest way possible, but we learned. Your words seemed sincere, and I saw genuine regret in your eyes. Perhaps this experience was a lesson for all of us. For them, to appreciate people while they are present. For me, to value myself before it's too late. At that moment, Luzia returned with Antonio, who was beaming after the adventure at the creek. Grandma, I saw a huge frog, and Aunt Luzia said you're going to live here now. Is that true? Can I come visit you? Can I stay in the room with the window that looks out to the orchard? His enthusiasm was contagious, and I couldn't help but smile. Yes, my love, I'm thinking of staying here. And of course, you can visit me whenever you want. The room with the orchard view will be yours. He jumped for joy, and his childlike glee seemed to relieve some of the tension in the room. When the time to say goodbye came, it was harder than I imagined. Antonio clung to me, reluctant to leave. Promise you won't disappear again, he asked, his little eyes shining with held-back tears. I promise, my love, I will never disappear from your life again. Marcelo hugged me tightly, whispering a broken apology in my ear. To my surprise, Patricia also hugged me tightly, something she rarely did. I watched the car drive away down the dirt road, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't fully name. There was sadness, yes, but also a sense of liberation, of new possibilities, of a future that, for the first time in years, seemed full of promise. Luzia came closer and put her arm around my shoulders. You were amazing, Clotilde, strong, clear, dignified. I'm proud of you. Thank you, sis, for everything, for welcoming me, for listening to me, for supporting me in this difficult decision. So, are you going to accept the job at Bernadette's Inn? I looked at the horizon, at the distant mountains bathed in the golden light of sunset. I felt the cool breeze on my face, the smell of wet earth and wildflowers, and above all, I felt the intoxicating sensation of being the author of my own story. Yes, I will accept. A new life is beginning, Luzia, and for the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely excited to see what tomorrow will bring. It's been 3 months since I started my new life here in Petropolis. The room with a view of the inn's garden, a Conchego de Serra, has become my home. Every day I wake up at 6 a.m. Not out of obligation, but by choice. I prepare breakfast for the guests alongside Bernadette, who has become not just my boss, but a great friend. The afternoons are dedicated to the inn's accounting. I do this work with the same care and dedication as when I was a full-time accountant. On Thursdays, I have the day off and join the group of ladies for a game of Buraco at Solange's house. Olga, Marta, and Teresa are now part of my close circle of friends. On Friday nights, Luzia and I have dinner together, either at her place or at the inn. On weekends, I often receive visits from my beloved grandson Antonio, who loves to run around the garden, explore the stream, and sleep in the special room I prepared for him, with a window overlooking the orchard. My story of disappearance taught valuable lessons to all of us. For Marcelo, it was a painful awakening about how he was treating his own mother. For Patricia, it was an understanding that people are not utilities, even when they serve us out of love. For me, it was a late but essential discovery that it's never too late to start over, to value ourselves, to demand the respect we deserve. It wasn't an easy path. The first weeks away from them were about adjusting, and I confess, there were moments of doubt. There were nights I woke up scared, not recognizing where I was, missing the familiar sounds of the house in Grigio. Nights when I wondered if I was being selfish, if I should forgive and return to the known routine, no matter how painful it was. But those doubts faded as I built my new life. I discovered simple pleasures I had forgotten. Reading an entire book without interruptions, walking through the city without rushing. Watching the sunset on the porch with a cup of tea. Talking to new people who didn't see me only as Marcelo's mother or Antonio's grandmother, but as Clotilde, a woman with stories to tell, with her own opinions, with intrinsic value. My relationship with Marcelo and Patricia also improved. The distance created a respect that proximity had eroded. Now, when they visit me, it's truly a visit. They bring gifts, engage with me genuinely, ask about my work, my friends, my life. And when I go to their house once a month for a Sunday lunch, I'm treated as the guest of honor, not as someone who should help wash the dishes afterward. Patricia surprised me by hiring a housekeeper to help out 3 times a week. "We realized how much work you had, Mrs. Clotilde," she said during one of my visits. "And how invisible that work was to us." It was a simple but significant acknowledgement. As for Antonio, our bond is stronger than ever. Now, when he's with me, it's by choice, not by his parents' convenience. We spend quality time together, doing things we both enjoy. And when he tells his friends about his grandmother, he speaks with pride. My grandma Clotilde works at a beautiful inn in Petropolis and makes the best cornbread cake in the world. What I learned from this whole experience, and what I want to share with all of you watching, is that we should never accept being less than we are out of fear of loneliness, complacency, or a misunderstood love. True love, whether between a mother and child, spouses, or friends, is based on mutual respect and valuing each other in their entirety. I also learned that it's never too late to change. At 68, when many told me it was time to rest, to be taken care of, I found a new purpose, new friendships, a new way to face life. Age is just a number, and each dawn brings the possibility of reinvention. Above all, I learned that sometimes we need to disappear to be seen. I had to vanish from their lives for them to realize my importance, not just as someone who kept the house running, but as a person, with feelings, desires, and self-worth. Today, I look in the mirror and see a woman different from the one who, 3 months ago, heard her son call her a lazy old woman. I see a woman with wrinkles, yes, each one telling a story of joys and sorrows, of struggles and triumphs, but mainly, I see a woman with a sparkle in her eyes, with plans for the future, with certainty of her worth. If you, watching me, are going through something similar, feeling invisible, undervalued, treated as less than you deserve, my story is for you. It's a reminder that you have the power to change your narrative, to demand respect, to seek your happiness even when it seems too late. I want to sincerely thank you for following me this far, for listening to the story of Grandma Clotilde, who chose to disappear to teach a lesson about value and respect. If you relate to my journey or know someone who could benefit from it, please subscribe to the channel. We have many more exciting stories to share. Real stories of people who, like me, faced challenges, made tough decisions, and found strength where they least expected it. Please like this video. It helps our channel grow and reach more people who need to hear these stories of overcoming and self-discovery. And please, comment below. Share something similar, if you've ever had to make a tough decision to earn respect, or just what you thought of my story. Your comments are the heart of this channel. They motivate us to keep going. If you're new here, check out the other videos on the channel. We have stories like that of Dona Clotilde, who at 75 discovered a new passion for painting and became an artist, or Seu Sebastio, who after losing his wife to cancer found solace and purpose in a support group he founded himself. These are real stories, from real people, told by themselves, without filters, without embellishments. And if our stories touched your heart and you want to help us continue this work, consider making a contribution through our Value Demace. This form of donation helps us cover production costs, travel, and equipment needed to bring you more videos daily. Even a small amount makes a big difference for an independent channel like ours, allowing us to reach more people with messages of hope and transformation. Your support is essential to keep this space of sharing and learning alive. With your help, through Value Demace, we can improve the quality of our videos and expand our reach, bringing these moving stories to more and more people who need to hear that it's never too late to start over, to value themselves, to demand respect. Always remember, we are the authors of our own story, regardless of age or circumstances. It took me, Clotilde Fernandez, at 68, to hear the most painful words from my own son to understand that I had worth, that I deserved respect, that I still had so much to live and offer. Don't wait to hear harsh words to take action. Don't let time pass while you diminish yourself for a misunderstood love. Value yourself today, now, and demand to be valued by others. This is the greatest lesson I take from my experience and share with all of you. Thank you for watching this far. I hope to see you again in the next video of the channel, where life stories gain voice and meaning.